The Mossad has a slogan, which is the anthem of the Mossad, if you want to call it. It's a biblical term. It says, by way of deception, thou shalt do war. And that's what's on the logo of the Mossad. What does the Mossad do to the United States? The Mossad regards the U.S. as its own playing ground, as a tool to an end, saying, you guys make nice arms that we can use. You guys have things that we want, therefore we want to take it. Now, you can't blame the Mossad for everything. I mean, you have to blame your own government. I mean, as far as your government is concerned, what you are is like one of those cash machines to the world. No limit. Big sale. They're selling out whatever they want. So you can't really blame countries for coming in and taking. I mean, you're saying, here it is, take it. These countries need it. What do you expect? I've been trained by Mossad, and I feel that nobody can hurt me. I do this in a way because I know that they can't touch me. Because I was one of them, and I was instilled with that feeling. So just remember, there are people like me that are not afraid of them, and they're the scariest group out there, and there is nothing that eats them. I mean, there are animals in the wild that multiply, and nobody can touch them because nobody can touch them. And the only way to stop them is to cut away their food. And they're feeding on the U.S. And the only way you can stop the Mossad is stop the money going to the Mossad. Now, when you stop the money going to the Mossad, that's not enough. You have to stop the people from buying drugs in the U.S. because that part of that money also goes to the Mossad. Because you're not dealing with a small nitpick organization that is out there. You're dealing with 1,500 people that run hundreds of thousands of people. And whoever they can't run, they buy. If they can't buy, they kill. You have intelligence agencies that want to root out the Mossad. They can't, because once they do catch a guy, and they nail him, and they know he is that, and it's proof, and they're going to bring him in, the boss of that guy says, what are you doing? That file's closed. He said, but I'm going to arrest the guy. Oh, he's out of the country. When Pollard was caught, all the guys that ran him, where are they? He was under surveillance. One time you caught an Israeli, and you know that they're spying. You've caught more Russians than you've caught Mossad. Once an operation goes bad, the Mossad guy picks up and leaves, and everybody else has stayed in mud. I mean, Pollard is a very good example of that. He came into the Israeli embassy, and they kicked him out because of internal rivalry. He thought he was a patriot. There is no such thing as dual loyalty. This is a myth. People say, well, the Jewish community has a dual loyalty. That's wrong. Either you're loyal to your country or you're not. There is no duality in that. You cannot be loyal to two countries. Never will Israel agree to have an Israeli support the U.S. the way they expect people in the Jewish community to support Israel. There are more people in Israeli jails for helping U.S. intelligence than you have Israelis in American jails. Because any time there was a guy that was set 15 years in Israeli prison, and nobody knew about him. He was a major in the Air Force, and he was arrested because he met with a secretary from the American embassy, and allegedly was intending to help the CIA. He didn't help the CIA. Nobody said he did. He intended. And 15 years later, they said that he was in jail. He was incommunicado. Nobody knew where he was. He disappeared. I mean, when I was in the Mossad, and we had a guy that gave us problems in the U.S., and he was speaking out, and he was talking like Pete talked once and said, Israel is bombing Lebanon with cluster bombs. We say, hey, who's that guy? Pete Makakti, we used to call him. Yeah, which is Pete the cockroach. Because he makes a lot of noise and you can't get rid of him. So what you do is you get in touch with a guy in the station in New York or in the station in Washington. You say, tell the guys at B'nai B'rith to label him. And of course the campaign starts, and before you know it, the guy's labeled. And he's an anti-Semite. Because that's what we say he is. And that's one stain you cannot wash. Now, it shames me as a Jew to tell you that. But that's the fact. And it's wrong. People say there's a dual standard. I'll give you an example of a dual standard. An officer admitted that he massacred 43 Egyptian prisoners of war in the 56 war. And others admitted to the total of close to 1,000 Egyptian civilians and soldiers that were killed in 67. Now everybody knows that in Israel, but nobody's actually come out and admitted it. These guys have admitted it. What has the government of Israel said? Well, it's a very saddening thing to hear, but too long has passed for us to actually be able to put them on trial. Now that's a double standard. And I think that shows that your press is worthless. 1,000 people, most of them actually were Sudanese workers that were working on highways in the Sinai. They weren't even soldiers. And you know what the reason was that they killed them? We had nobody to guard them. And we couldn't take them with us. And nobody dares. You know what? Even the Egyptian government is not daring to say anything because they're afraid that you Americans will stop aid to them for complaining. The Israel transport arms through the Bedouins to the Mujahideen, not deliver, not anything else, but just transfer arms, in fact, and the money was transferred back. So when you deliver in the Sinai to Bedouins, who deliver to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, who then deliver it to the Mujahideen, that's quite a trip. So it is possible not to bump into Mossad people. And when you do, you don't necessarily know that you are. And if you do know, you don't tell about it. That's where their power comes from. They can do anything they want, and nobody will stop them. Now, by not talking about it, what you have done is you've said, okay, you guys, you can do whatever you want. I'll give you an interesting story. You have a thing called free trade. There's a free trade that you have with Israel. Did you know that? That's the first free trade you ever had with Israel. There is an actual agreement, a free trade agreement with Israel. And I remember, as a member of the Mossad, how we used to play with that. We used to go to companies in Europe and say, we need from you this and this and this as far as arms are concerned, whether it be Bofors or some, whatever, engine manufacturer or whatever, or electronics. And we say, but we've got a deal for you. And they say, what's the deal? You want to sell stuff to the States with no barriers? They said, sure. He said, okay, you bring your stuff to Israel, we'll package it, and we'll send it to the States. You see, we got free trade. So suddenly you got half of Europe trading through. Israel manufactures more things that it's really never heard of. I mean, if it was up to what Israel can do, we'd still be selling vegetables and sand. No, but there's a lot of stuff that comes from Europe, is funneled through Israel to the United States. Free trade. So now the Europeans say, like a European television manufacturer, let's say Blaupunkt, just an example. They can say, hey, we don't need free trade. We can sell it. We send the televisions through Tel Aviv. They box it, good in cardboard, and they ship it to the U.S. And voila, free trade, one way. Because you see, you can't sell free trade back to Germany because you don't have a deal, unless you're willing to do it backwards to Israel. And I'm sure there are a few companies that are doing that. And this goes on and on. Now, the difference between that kind of an intelligence agency and what you have is the Mossad is not accountable to anybody except the Mossad. And they don't give a damn about the Israeli government because the Israeli government is temporary. See, they look at politicians and say, well, they're here today, they're gone tomorrow. What do they know? We know what's good for the country. We brought it up to here. If we make peace tomorrow, they'll put us apart, they'll close us down, they'll take away the military, and then the enemies will come and attack us, which a lot of them believe. But that doesn't give a chance to peace. And you know what the problem is with not having peace? There are not many more wars that Israel can win again and again, because Israel cannot lose a war. It has only one war to lose, and that's the end of it. And it's happened before, 3 times in our history, that we ended up being kicked out of the land because of zealots. The guys who kept bringing back war were zealots in our history. We have that, and it's happening now. Now, I'm quite surprised that you're surprised that Mossad works in the United States. You cannot imagine the power you feel when you work for an agency that allows you to do whatever you want as long as it works. You are allowed to go into other countries and break their laws, and if something happens, we'll come and get you. And they will. And they say to you, don't worry about the police because this is their layout. And this is how they work. CIA, FBI, all those guys don't have that kind of power. You know, nobody asked when Andrew Young resigned because he was taped in a meeting that he had in an ambassador's house, that he said that he might be willing to negotiate or talk to a PLO man. And somebody brought the transcripts of that call. Nobody said who taped it. Nobody asked. Because they knew the answer and they didn't want to hear it. When you're talking about the media, how do you buy media? Aside from buying the newspaper and the television station, or whatever, how do you buy media? You buy media with information. I'll tell you how it works. Let's assume one of you is a reporter. I'm a Mossad officer. You don't know who I am, but I call you up and I say, listen, I got a piece of information for you. And it turns out to be true. And you published it. And you get pushed up because you have good sources. 3 days later, I call you again. I give you another piece. Again. Now you're addicted. Then something happens. I don't want it published. I call you up. And I say, you know what you just heard? That's a lie. But if you publish it, I can't deal with you anymore. And you say to yourself, wait a minute. I get this good stuff once a week. This is a one-time in a lifetime piece. I don't care. Who cares about cluster bombs on Lebanon? Somebody else will write about it. And nobody does. And now the public doesn't know it happened. Because in the Mossad you say it this way. If it didn't happen and I reported it, it happened. If it happened and I didn't report it, it didn't happen. And that's the truth. That's the way it is. That's how intelligence agencies grab a hold and take power of your daily life. You got an order to carry out. It's legal where you came from. Wherever you did it, it's illegal, but they'll get you out. What's to be afraid of? All you have to worry about is not getting hurt while you're doing it. So the agencies or the Mossad keeps their thumbs out. Now what you have is you have a whole system of not liking your own agency, which have their good reason to do that. I mean, you know, they do nasty things and they do various things, but you don't know how much other intelligence agencies work in the U.S. Now, we used to joke, when I was growing up in Israel, we used to say, the Arabs clean the streets, the Druze protect our borders, the Americans pay our bills, and we live happily ever after.